Welcome to Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean. What we plan on doing today is we are going to remove the CV axles on Sean's 2002 Toyota 4Runner. We're going to remove his CV axles. He's got aftermarkets in there right now. We're going to remove those aftermarket CV axles and junk them because they're bad. And then he has his original OEM ones that he replaced when the boots tore, and we're going to reboot his old OEM CV axles and put them back in his truck. The OEM ones are better quality than the aftermarket ones. So we're going to show you how to remove and replace a CV axle if you're just going to replace the whole joint. We're going to show you how to do a reboot procedure if you want to save your axles. And we're also going to discuss how you would do an extended boot mod, because what happens when you lift the truck, you do a suspension lift, it changes the angle of the CV axle, and then the ribs of the boot are able to rub. And let me grab a CV axle and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So this is the inner joint right here that goes into the front differential. This is the outer joint that hooks to the wheel. So when you lift the truck, it changes the angles. You see how right now the ribs aren't touching? And then when you change the angle and it bends down, these ribs right here can touch and cause friction, and then over time it will tear the boot. So what we're going to do is an extended mod where we're going to stretch this boot out further to where the ribs are going to be further apart, so where there's going to be less of a chance for them to rub now. We're going to discuss how we're going to do that later in the video, but basically the method is extending the boot out a little bit further so it has less of a chance to rub, cause friction, and tear the boot. What we're going to use, like always as a reference, we're going to use the factory service manual. This is from my 2000 Toyota 4Runner. The pages we're using is in the suspension and axle area, and it starts on SA15, and it shows a schematic of the part breakdown. So it shows from the inner joint going towards the outer joint. It shows all the parts: the dust cover, the snap ring, the inboard joint, the snap ring that holds the tripod on, and then the inner boot, the two clamps that go with it, the two clamps that go with the outer joint boot, and then this has a dust seal on it. So we're just going to be replacing the boots and the clamps and the snap rings. We're not going to be replacing any dust seals because the Reboot kit we bought doesn't come with that stuff. When you go to the removal procedure, it's a little bit different than what I've seen on videos. It starts off with, you jacking up the vehicle, you remove the front wheel, you drain the differential oil, and then you take the dust cover off the hub, and then you get to the axle nut. You take the cotter pin out, you take the axle nut off. It's torqued to 174 foot-pounds, and we're going to show you different ways you can get that off, either with an impact gun, a big breaker bar. The next step, which is kind of confusing, is it shows disconnecting the drive shaft, knocking it loose and knocking the snap ring out of its purchase from the flange first before you remove the other parts, like disconnecting the lower control arm from the ball joint and removing the knuckle off of the outer of the axle. So we're not going to necessarily do this first. We're going to remove the lower control arm from the ball joint. It also doesn't mention disconnecting the outer tie rod. That's another thing we're going to do that this factory service manual doesn't actually say to do. So we're going to do it in a little bit different order and add an extra step of removing the outer tie rod. And then it goes into showing different things of how you check the joint for its function, and shows when you take it apart to make match marks on this inner joint to match it up with the shaft. And then you also make match marks on the tripod and on the axle itself, so you get everything back in the place that it was originally. So we're going to do all that. And then it just shows, lastly, removing some dust seals, which we're not going to do. And it talks about how you put everything back together, putting a little tape on the spline so you don't damage the boot, and getting everything back on there. And we're going to show all this in the video, but these are all the pages we're going to be using. And then it talks about tightening the different types of clamps. It's already got the axles out. We're going to do the reboot procedure first, and then we're going to go into taking his old axles out of his truck and replacing them with the ones we rebooted. So here's some of the parts that we bought for this. The differential fill plug has a crush washer. It's got this flat side and then this kind of a rounded side. This is the crushing side that goes towards, the rounded side goes towards the differential. That part number is 12157 10010. The drain plug has a special copper washer, and we learned this when I did the 30,000 mile service video, and that part number is 90430-24003. And then Sean bought 2 of these Reboot kits. So since you have 2 CV joints, he bought the 2 CV Reboot kits, and that number is 04438-35060. So that's the Reboot kits, and we bought 2 of those. Some of the stuff that Reboot kit comes with is it comes with the more of the rubbery inner joint boot with the 2 bend over type of clamps. Bend over type of clamp. I was expecting something that I would be using this special tool that I bought, band clamp, CV boot tool, but this is just a simple bend over thing where you bend it over and then you clamp it down. So we'll see how well that works. And then the outer joint is more of like a plastic feeling one, and this comes with 2 kind of the crimping type of clamps, and you use this special tool. Maybe not the best, but it's a special type of tool that you get it on there to tighten these clamps. And then it came with the 2 snap rings. This is for the outer shaft, and this is one right here, keeps the tripod on the shaft. And then it comes with the 2 different greases. It doesn't really say in the kit which is which, but we just learned from doing our own research online that this more tan colored grease, this 90999-94037, this is for the inner joint, the one near the differential. And then this one in this white container, the 90999-94189, this is for the outer joint, and this is more black color. You can see it squirting out there. That's a black grease. So this, again, the black grease, outer joint, the tan grease, inner joint. I wrote the cheat sheet of some torque specs. So the fill plug for the differential is 29 foot-pounds. The drain plug for the differential is 48 foot-pounds. The wheel lug nuts will torque to 85 foot-pounds. The drive shaft lock nut, also known as the axle nut, 174 foot-pounds. The lower ball joint castle nut that hooks the ball joint to the lower control arm, that's 105 foot-pounds. And the outer tie rod castle nut, that is torqued to 67 foot-pounds. That should be all the torque specs we'll need for this job. And so the next thing we're going to do, like I mentioned, we're going to reboot his old OEM CV axles, and then once we get done with that procedure, then we're going to jack up the front of his truck, put it on jack stands, and go through the procedure of removing the CV axles and putting the rebooted ones back in. So we're going to get this inner clip off. Now I try to use some lock ring pliers to get on there, but it's kind of hard to get a purchase point on there, so we're just going to use our screwdriver and pry over one end and work it off, and so it comes off like that. We're going to cut these clamps so we can get this boot off this inner joint. So I have this nice pair of cutters I just bought, so I'm just going to try to dig it in here and try to grab a hold of the clamp. I don't know how well it's going to work, but there we go. That busted it. Take the clamp off, and then we could slip this boot off. And this is going to be messy. You can already see there's a bunch of grease coming out here. Maybe we should hold the rag underneath here, but because his is torn is actually down on the bottom. So pull this off. Now this inner joint will just slide off, but before we do that, we're going to make match marks on this with the axle. Pull up on a little bit and wipe the grease and make some type of match marks. But we're supposed to make a match mark to get it on in the same relation. Make a match mark here, and then make a match mark on the shaft itself so you put it back in the same position. Okay, so what we did is we cut along the bottom part of this lip to separate the boot. We want to save this section right here for the boot modification we're going to do to extend the boots out. So we want to save this little piece, and we're going to carefully take the clamp off. We're not going to cut the rubber, so we'll have to pry this clamp apart and cut it carefully. And now what we're going to do is take the cutters and just cut down the boot so we can just remove it, so we can clean up the area without removing this to make our match marks. So I'm just going to grab this pair of dikes and just start cutting down. There we go. I'm just going to throw this in the trash. And I'm just going to wipe some of this out. So maybe we'll be able to make the match marks the factory service manual suggests before we take things apart. Okay, this is what we came up with to make match marks. I'm just going to use a punch with a hammer and make a mark here. I already started it, but I'm going to just make a little deeper mark. And then make one on the shaft itself. So we did that step in the factory, what the factory service manual suggested. I put a punch mark here, but I couldn't get a good mark here, so I just put a piece of black tape and then used a silver Sharpie, made a mark here, and then put a piece of tape on the shaft, made a mark there. And this is pretty sticky tape, and I cleaned it up first with this bicycle cleaning called Clean Streak, and it cleans and degreases things pretty well, so to get it the tape to stick a little better. So now we have these marked in relation to where they were before we disassemble. Now we could slide this joint off. So this is what the inner joint looks like. We'll clean that up, all the old grease out, put this here for now. I was worried about these being able to slide off, but I guess not. So we're good to go then. All we had to do is do match marks there. It's a good thing. These don't come off. So we're just going to clean this up with the rags. Maybe a little bit of that Clean Streak cleaner. And then the next thing we got to do is we got to take, there's a snap ring right on top here. There's a snap ring right here. There's a snap ring right here that we got to get off. And then we could pound this tripod off. So this is the snap ring right here. And we got to get that off. All right, so we just did this part. We did match marks on the outer joint and the shaft so we can get it back in place correctly. Now what we're going to do is the next step, before we take the snap ring off, we're going to make a match mark here and here. So on the axle and on the tripod itself. So I'm going to use this punch. Make a little mark there. We could see that. And then we'll make a mark on the tripod. So that's the mark on the axle. Let's line it up with that tooth. Yeah, I made a little mark. It's going to be very hard for you to see in the video, but it made enough of a depression, so now we can match up the splines in the tripod. So a mark on the axle, and then a mark on the tripod, right there and right there. Those two spots, so we can get it back in the relation it was. And now we're going to take the snap ring off and then pound this tripod off. So I got these lock ring pliers. Gonna get it on there, spread it, and get it off. There we go. So there's that lock ring off. And now the next step is the factory service manual says to use a brass bar and hammer and remove the tripod. And I happen to have a brass drift or punch. Why brass is because it's softer than steel, so it won't damage the part. I'm getting it on the inner lip. You don't want to pound on these, okay, because this is a machine like polished part, so you wouldn't want to hammer on this. You want to hammer on this lip right here. So, oh, that's like nothing coming off. I'm going to try pounding from a little bit different angle on over here. It's coming off with very little pressure. Kind of helps to have a third hand. Okay, I think that's free, huh? There we go. That's all. Our match mark is right here. And then the match mark on this is right there. So we'll be able to get it back in the relation it was. Like I said earlier, we want to salvage this ring of rubber from the old boot for the extended boot mods. I'm going to carefully unpry the factory clamp. I'm going to get a little screwdriver in there, unclamp this to where I'm going to just be able to cut the clamp off without damaging this rubber section, because we're going to use this. So now we can remove that. It's kind of like this is the factory clamp. It's just it's a simple bend over clamp, one that I didn't think it was going to have. So we can pretty much know that either these are the OEM ones, because Sean bought his truck used, so he's not 100% sure these are the OEM axles, but seeing that there's an OEM clamp, either somebody rebooted these with OEM clamps, or this is the actual original CV joint, which we're hoping. So now I'm going to grab my dikes and I'm just going to cut this clamp off. Okay, so that clamp is off. Now we should be able just to slide this off, I think, if it's not locked on there. Maybe it's going to take a little persuasion from a screwdriver. Free it up a little bit. Okay, so you could see right here, see how it's grooved right there? So this actually must have knobs on the inside. So I'm sliding this over. So you could see right here that there's a little lips that match up with those lips, so it helps keep it in place. We're going to save this, and now we could work on getting the outer joint off. And from what we read, you don't take this apart, you just take the boot off and slide it up over towards the inner joint and then get it off. But you don't actually take this joint off the axle like we took this joint off. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the outer boot. So I'm just going to cut these off. These are a different style of clamp than the other ones. They're not a bend over type, they're a crimping type. So I'm just going to get my dikes on here and snap it off one time. There we go. Broke it. Got that one off. Let's try to get this one. That's better. Trying to cut that middle section's pretty burly, so maybe go for one of the edges like I just did. Now we could slide this off, so working with a screwdriver maybe to break it free a little bit. Just work a screwdriver around the edge. Okay, there we go, and it's going to make a huge mess. Probably get a rag on there first. Get rags ready. Okay, take this boot off. We're just sliding it over towards the inner joint. So this is going in the trash. Now we'll grab some of the more messy rags and mop up some of this grease. The outer joint was black and the inner joint was tan, and the inner joint grease definitely looked a little bit lighter in color, so it's making sense. Lots of rags. It's looking pretty good. Go another rag. We got to clean up the other ones too. So feeling this, these feel really smooth. Feels really smooth on there. So hopefully he wasn't driving around with the boot torn and road contaminants getting in there that did any damage to this joint. But it feels really smooth to me. So hopefully it's all copacetic and it's going to last him a long time after we reboot this. So that's pretty clean. We got to clean the inside of this out. This has got all kinds of old grease, and you can see again, see how this is more of a tan color? This is the inner joint, so it's more of that color of this grease right here. So it makes sense that the tan is the inside joint, the black is the outside joint. So let's get a rag in there, clean all this out.
I wonder how many rags we're going to use on this job. 20 rags, one old bag.
So I guess we're more concerned with this one being really clean because this boot was torn. So depending on how long it was torn, maybe some contaminants from the road, like a little bit of like grit or dirt, got in there. So we're making sure that this one's really clean. And that's looking pretty darn clean inside there. And then I'm going to spray this one there. What's good about this cleaner is it dries really well. And it cleans really well.
Okay, and then I'm just going to wipe it down with another clean rag.
I'm like hitting this side, then I'm sliding this and getting behind here too. Okay, that's pretty darn clean. All right. Here's our match mark. Okay. The next step is we got to get the new boot slid over. So this is the outer boot. So you take your more plastic feeling one. This is kind of a stiff plastic as opposed to the inner joint's more of a rubber. So we got to get the 2 clamps and the 1 boot slid over. Okay, so while the joint is in this fashion, so this is the inboard side and this is the outboard side, that joint that's staying together. We're going to slide the plastic feeling boot over the top. We want a little room to work, so then we're going to at some point have to get these clamps on there too. So we could put this clamp here. We'll put the small one on first. Just get it on there loose. Will it fit over there loose? Is it going to get locked on there? Maybe get past there. So get it past the point of the other boot part. There we go. Because this is where the inner boot joint affixes to. So got it past there. Slip the inboard clamp on. And to make note, the inboard uses this clamping style, not the fold over one. So these you have to use a special crimping pliers to crimp these and lock them in tight. So now we're going to flip the joint over. Okay, so we're wondering whether or not to get the smaller side of the boot in place in those grooves, so when we squeeze the grease in there, it's not just all going to come out through the edges. So I'm going to pull up on this, okay, and it's snapped in place. I think you could pull this down enough to where you could squeeze the grease in there and then fit it in. So we're thinking that's the best way to go, is to snap the smaller side into its grooves first, and then squeeze the grease in, and then we'll get the other clamps on. Okay, so we've got the lower part in place on the shaft. I'm going to squeeze the black grease in there. Have to reset here. It's like squeezing a tube of toothpaste. Pretty much helps to have an extra set of hands.
I suppose you can do this no problem by yourself, but squeeze a little in the back there. There's a whole mess of grease. Now I'm doing a toothpaste squeeze. Getting the rest out.
Okay, I think that's good enough. Good enough for gutman work. Okay. Oh. I'm gonna lose some of that grease. There we go. Okay. We got all the grease, all the black grease squeezed in there. Now we're going to get this clamp in place. And then I'm hoping that these cheapo pliers I have are going to work okay. So if you see how this works, is that you squeeze each side of these, so you squeeze this side and this side together and basically tightens up the clamp. And these pliers, these jaws are going to grab onto either side. And I'm kind of kicking myself for not getting a better pair of pliers. So, okay, so we ran into a problem that we didn't foresee. These tools that I bought, these CV boot pliers, are junk. And I'll maybe put a link to the ones that are junk so you don't make the same mistake that I made. This is all we got for now, so we're going to try to make it work, but it's not the greatest tool for crimping these style clamps. So that was our main roadblock right now to getting this thing done. Alright, so we're going to work on the next one. We're going to use a C-clip. So the kit comes with an extra C-clip for the tripod. So we're going to take the old one and slide it over here and put it in this groove, and then put a section of the rubber on, or actually the clip is going to go on this spot right here, and then a section of the old rubber boot is going to go here, and then we're going to stretch that boot over the top of that so it extends out further. That's what our goal is. So we're going to use the lock ring pliers to expand it out and get it over the spindle. Tweaking this so much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we're just cleaning up this edge. We want all of this, so from these two like raised edges, and I'm just cleaning up this edge right here with a utility blade. Again, in case I forgot to mention, we're taking the snap ring, the old snap ring that held this tripod, we took it and put it right here into the groove for the inner boot. And so then we took this section of the old boot, trimmed it, and then we're going to slide this over, and then it moves enough to where you can just, it's malleable. So the idea is now that clip is going to hold this in place. I'm just pulling on a little bit, see how well it holds, and it looks like it's holding pretty good, so I don't think it's going to go anywhere, so that's good. So next step is we needed to get the boot on first, because the boot is going to be in the way. Now the factory service manual says to tape this up to protect the boot. I don't know how necessary that is. Let's see if we can just get it over it. Doesn't seem like it's binding too bad. Let's clamp over here. We got the inner fold over clamp on first. And then we're going to slide this boot down. And then now we're going to work on getting that piece that we cut and the C-clip right there. So I'm going to clamp this right here. So Slide that on first. That's fine. Get our lock ring pliers. Let's see where it's at. The lighting's harsh. I gotta grab some pliers or something. Grab this. There we go. Okay, finally got it over. Get the C-clip in place with the pliers again. It's a little bit tweaked. Slide it in place. Maybe bend it up a little bit. I think that's okay. And we got to bring that inner piece up, snap it in place. Come on. There we go. Okay. Is that going to come loose? Pulling pretty hard, so that lock ring or snap ring is holding in there pretty good. So I think this method that we learned online is going to work. Okay, so now we can get this in this position. Hopefully that's going to extend it up pretty good. So let's clamp it back down lower so we can work on it lower. And where's the match mark? Let's get the match mark right here. Okay, so this match mark is right there. I still got the tape there and that one's there. Okay, so we got to grab this and match mark is there. Okay, so that thing just slid on by hand. Took nothing to get it off. We matched our match marks up, and then now we got to get the C-clip to put it back on. Just going to expand this out a little bit, hopefully slip it on. Oops. There we go, and that's in. So just double check, make sure that the clip is fully in its seat. Looks like it is. Okay. So it's going to go on like this because we put, see the tape there and the tape here, so it's going to go on like so. So now that I already know that, I'm going to peel the tape off of this one because I know it's going to go in that fashion. So the next thing, we'll get the clamp in place. So remember, it goes this way. Okay, so we got to fill this up with the other grease. Okay, so we'll put a little bit of grease in here. Start it. Do we have to do this? We don't know. All right, the rest is going to go inside here.
I don't know if you want to hold the boot down that far because it's kind of compressing it. We're going to need all the room we can get. This is like frosting a cake or something. Good thing it doesn't smell like what it looks like. Baby shit. Okay. Let's get her on this side. Man, oh man. Well, they definitely don't skimp on the grease, do they? Just what's all underneath your car, on your boot brakes. Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Okay. Let's call that good, huh? Okay, now we got to slide the joint this fashion. Okay. Snap it up in place. There we go. Get it up on that lip. Oh, I lost it. There we go. How's it look? Now, next step is these clamps are just I think Toyota's own design. I don't know, but there's no special tool. You just bend it over and it cinches up.
Let's see how well this works. You know what? It looks like it works pretty good. It's got like a hinge point there.
And you have to hammer those down, I guess. Ooh, hard on the fingers.
There's an eye.
Oh, let's see how well that holds it. Yeah, that ain't going anywhere. Let's do the same with the bottom one. Now, that's right up against the old boot. That's it.
Yeah, perfect.
That doesn't seem as tight as the other one, though. Okay, what some of the people that do this modification didn't really talk about is, here's the problem. This original clamp that comes with the kit, it's meant to secure the boot over the wide area where its normal purchase point is. So when we put the old piece in the spot where this thing was supposed to sit, to extend it out further down, to spread the fins of the boot out further, now this clamp is not going to do the job to keep it tight along the axle shaft. So we're just using a pretty heavy duty black zip tie, and I've got this bicycle tool. It's for tightening derailleur cables and brake cables, so I can maybe put this in the description of if you're interested in doing it. But basically it works, it grabs on and then it stretches it really tight, if you could see that. So this cams into here, and then this goes up against what you're tightening against, and then it just stretches it super tight, tighter than you could probably get it with your hands. There we go. Now there's no sharp lip. And when we're pulling on this thing, it was slipping down with this old clamp, and now we can't move it down. So I think this zip tie might work. This is all experimental, folks. We'll obviously report back later on if the zip tie failed or if this slipped and was allowing grease. So, because our concern was not really the movement of the boot, really, but we're concerned with, like, if this boot does move, that grease is going to get past that piece that we left in the regular groove, and then it's going to seep out. So we're hoping with this zip tie cranked around here that we're not going to lose any grease out of this connection now, hopefully. Now we're going to have to cut this old thing off because it's in the way. Oh, we got to get this clip on. Let's get this clip back in. Is that the new one?
Yeah.
So this one, I wonder if you could just get it on by hand. Maybe not. I'll use the pliers again. In order to try to use these pliers to get it over, you really distort it. So we're going to try a different method. Whoops, just putting it in the groove and tapping it in place. Let's see how well that works. That's better. Way better. So we were a little concerned that this has a lot of slop when you're putting the new ring on, but comparing it to one of the ones that just came off, there is a lot of slop in this ring. It flops all around, so I think it just meant that way, that when it slides into the differential, it gets compressed to where it needs to be, and then these little lips hold it in place and don't allow it to fall out of the differential. So when you're doing this, if you got a lot of play in here, don't worry. It seems to be normal. Okay, so what we noticed on Sean's truck is that both of the inner joint boots ripped right at this lip. So maybe that's a weak point, but in reality, where the lifted trucks are ripping are in between these ribs, because like I showed you at the beginning of the video, the angle is more accentuated and the ribs rub, and then over time it'll cause them to tear because they're rubbing together. It's kind of interesting that his both failed right here at this lip. So, you know, maybe just old age or whatever, but something to notice. We're going to do the same procedure with this side. Or cut the boot off, make marks on this and on the axle, and then clean everything up and do the same procedure. If we didn't make this clear before, we're going to make it clear now. The whole point to making match marks before you take these things apart is that the parts have been wearing in this orientation for a long time, and then all of a sudden this can go in 3 different positions. I could pick this joint up and put it here or the other position, because there's 3 different spots that those little roller bearings, or whatever you call them, are on the tripod. So the whole point is to get it back where everything was wearing together, so there's less of a chance you're going to have any problems in the future because of how things were wearing together. They kind of mate up over time, the wearing surfaces. So that's the whole point of maybe making match marks on the joint and the axle, and then when we slide this off, making match marks on the tripod and also the axle, so we get everything back in the same relation that it was before. Now that we got the CV boots rebooted, so we've got that all done finally. And then now we've got the front of the truck jacked up and supported by 6-ton jack stands on the frame either side. So the whole front end's off the ground right now. We've got a chock fore and aft on one of the rear wheels, so it can't move. And Sean has a spacer, so the lug nuts were 21 millimeter, these were 19 millimeter. We used the impact gun, and so now we take this off. So now what we got to do is we got to get this dust cover off. So it looks like from what we've seen, wow, they really mangled that, didn't they? Well, you can see, folks, there's a little damage to his dust cover. Maybe we could fix that in the vise, pound it back in shape a little bit better. So what we're going to do is most likely is grab like a screwdriver and work around the edge of this dust cover and try not to destroy it like they did right here. That's getting nowhere. Okay. This is a more fine-edged tool. I don't even know what you call this. A little wedge tool that I have. I don't know where I got it. Ooh, that gave. I see a little sunshine. See, if you see here, you can see a little gap. I don't know if you can see it right there, but so it looks like you need something pretty thin to get in there.
Work along the other edge. Now, I also mentioned that if you ever take this off, you may be ruining this thing.
Yeah, well, yeah, if this has never come off, it might be hard, but I think the key is getting something really thin. I thought maybe a chisel, but I think the chisel would be too blunt. You see how this has a real knife edge to it? It's really thin. So you need something pretty thin to get in there. A real skinny screwdriver might work, but it didn't work at first. That other tool worked better. Now I'm just hitting it with some force this way to try to pop it loose. There we go. So let's see if we could get this bent out a little bit. I don't know if I can do it or not. My metal working skills. Bend this back in shape a little bit. Alright, so this has a cotter key, so you just got to straighten out the cotter key with a pair of dikes or whatever you got. Grab a hold of it and pull it out. We're not reusing these cotter keys, we're going to put new ones in. Okay, take this little lock jobber off. I don't know what you call this thing. Lock jobber. Now this is supposedly a 35 millimeters. Yeah, it is. Okay, 174 foot-pounds. So this is going to be a test for this DeWalt gun that I recently bought. This is one way to get it loose with the impact gun. Another way is that you have your buddy stand on the brakes holding the rotor still while you get a big breaker bar and a regular 35, not an impact socket, and you break it free that way. So we're going to try that method on the other side, but we're going to try it first with this impact gun, see how it does. And I did it. Just like downtown. Put that there. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to get the tie rod broken loose. We're going to get this castle nut broken loose that holds the lower control arm to the ball joint. This one loose, and broken free with pullers, and same with this one. So these have cotter keys. I'm just getting this cotter key out of the way. Yeah, that's a 19. Okay, that castle nut's free. We'll have to get a puller on there now and break the tie rod free from the knuckle of the ball joint. We got a puller on the knuckle of the ball joint, so we got the tines of this puller in between the boot and the knuckle of the ball joint, okay? So we're not destroying the boot. Just like so. And now that's free. Let's work on the ball joint, castle nut. Straighten out the cotter pin again. And then get a hold of it and pull it out. Okay. Let's see, remember what size that is. Must be a 24, huh? Okay, castle nut for that is off. Now we got to get another puller. The pullers I'm using for this job is from this kit I bought from OTC. OTC, it's got this a front end service kit, and it's $62.95. I bought it on Amazon, I can't remember, but it's got some pretty handy little pullers. So the one for the ball joint I'm going to use is this Pitman arm puller, and the one we used to get his tie rod free was this long tie rod puller. I've been able to use this one too in the past, but for whatever reason on his truck it wouldn't fit very well. This one fit on my truck really well, but I don't know. There we go. I just got to make sure I'm not destroying the boot of the ball joint. It looks like it's in between. Okay. So this might pop down with a little bit of force. Bang! Alright. That's free. Supposedly we could just pull this thing out and tap the axle out of the front. See if that works. You know what I mean? See if I can't get it. I remember we had trouble with this before. So, because it's hard to get in there. Yeah, it's loose. I didn't over tighten these. So these things are notorious for being hard to get off. It's a 10 millimeter Allen, and so it's best to use like a socket. And unfortunately, these are 3/8 drive that I got, and using an adapter and a 1/2 inch, I can't really get in there very well, so I have to use a shorty 3/8 one. But make sure you can get the fill plug loose so you don't drain the fluid and then realize you can't get the fill plug off. So now we'll work on the drain plug. Yeah, that's a 12. Yeah, so we're draining the front differential first before pull the axle so we don't make as big of a mess. There we go. Okay. There's a copper washer somewhere. Is it still attached to the differential? Yeah, it is. So we're going to replace that copper washer. We finally got the differential draining. That's a key step so you don't make as much of a mess. And then I'm going to use this brass hammer and just tap this out. Okay, it feels pretty free. There we go. And the light's falling on me. Okay, we've got that free. So one thing you're supposed to be careful of is when you're pulling the shaft out, you want to be careful of damaging this seal right here. Be aware of that. Be careful when you're pulling it out. Put up a little more. So, if you're wondering what the hell I'm doing with these zip ties, is I'm trying to zip tie it up to where the shaft is like parallel where it enters the differential, with the theory that it's going to be easier to knock out when it's parallel, when it's like not a lot of weight pulling down on the shaft that's in the differential. So that's the idea, is that get it about parallel so it's kind of easier to knock out. Okay, there's two ways to supposedly do this. One is you take a brass drift or punch and you get it on the lip and you pop it free, because inside here is where that clip on the end of the axle is seated in a flange, right behind a flange. So basically when you're hitting it out towards the wheel, as you're bringing the clip past that flange, and now you could slide the axle out of the differential. The second method is people get a pry bar, and they get a pry bar between there and they pop it free. But I'm going to try this drift method first. This seems to be a better purchase point, so I'm going to hit it here. That's not going, is it? Did it go out a little bit? Looks like I moved a little bit. That's not quite doing it. Is that it?
Yep.
That was easy. Okay, the pry bar seems to be the way to do it. Forget that brass drift method. Okay, so now we'll pull it out through the passenger side. Okay, and you can see right here, this is what was sitting in that flange that we were basically prying on it to break it past that flange, that ring that we showed you earlier. You want to look into there. That's what it looks like in the differential. If you see back past the splines, you could see where that little indentation is. I don't know if the lighting will work, but this is a look into the passenger side of the front differential. You can see the splines, and it looks like that little indentation is where that clip slides past and hooks to where you can't pull the CV axle out. And this is your outer seal here. You seem to have a little bit of grease here, so I don't know if this seal is worn out or not. We've read that it's good to put a little grease on this. The factory service manual says it's going to go in easiest with the gap facing downward, so we're going to put some grease on here to hopefully hold this thing in place, and that's where the opening is, right there. Okay, so you got to pull this out of the way, get it up in there, and then now slide that sucker in there. It feels like it's beginning to go in there. Let me get over here and get underneath and see if I can get a better angle at it. So what we got is a long pry bar against the flange here, and we're going to pound it in from here past the first lip. Is it moving at all?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
It is?
Yeah.
You sure?
I think so, yeah. It wants to go in, but it keeps like bouncing out right where it is.
Okay. We were struggling a little bit to get it lined up, and I'm going to show you what I did over here. So I basically just shoved. We're using these zip ties again to hold it up in place. You get it started at the beginning of the splines, and then that clip has to first get past a little lip. And so I literally just pushed with my hands right like this, and it pushed right in. So I first hit it with a pry bar on the lip in there. Let's see, let me show you over here. I first hit on one of these lips right here, but it wasn't going in. So just pushing from the very end was able to get it past, and now it's locked in. So there you go there. So this might be a little bit of a struggle to get it lined up, but it seems to just be pushing from the opposite end was the way to do it. Okay. There was a little bit of grease on this inner seal, so I'm just going to lubricate this a little bit with some of this boat and trailer grease, because it rides on this lip right here, so it wouldn't hurt to put a little grease on there. Now, pull this out. Be careful of the seal. The spline's lined up. There we go. And there we go. With his beefier spring and shock, once this lower control arm broke free, we can't, basically, even putting the jack underneath it, we're starting to take weight off the jack stand, which isn't good. Use a bottle jack, this trick that we learned. We're going to put a bottle jack up here. When the A-arm broke free, the suspension was holding it down, so we put a jack underneath there to get it up part way, but then we started taking weight off of the 6-ton jack over here. So we put a bottle jack, the stock bottle jack, up against the fender, the base against the fender, and then pushing down on the upper control arm, and that was able to push it down the rest of the way. I didn't even have to use a lot of pressure. I'd turn this actually with my hand. Just a little extra leverage, and now I get the nut started, castle nut started, and then we can get all these jacks out of the way and torque this to spec. Okay, lower castle nut for the ball joint to 105 foot-pounds. There it is. Okay. Like last time, what happened to us, when we hit 105 foot-pounds, you have to be in a position where you can get the cotter key in. So it's a little bit off, so we have to just tighten a little more till we can get the cotter key. We don't want to go looser. So we had to turn it a little more to get it to line up. Now we got a new cotter key back in here. And now we got to get the outer tie rod back connected and torque to spec. So we're going to torque the outer tie rod castle nut to 67 foot-pounds. How come it clicked in? No, it's not. There we go. Okay, get a fresh cotter key in there. Huh? Maybe. That's a beefier one. We'll do that and we'll trim it again like we did the other one. So we're just going to bend this back over the top. I'm going to trim this a little bit too. Cut that. There. So we have the lower ball joint connected back to the lower control arm. We've got the tie rod connected back to the knuckle of the lower ball joint. Now we're going to get the axle nut back on, and this is going to be a situation where he's going to have to stand on the brakes. The other way you can do this, which would be a little more time consuming, is that you have to put the tire back on and then lower the vehicle to the ground so it doesn't move, so you could tighten this, and then take the tire back off and get your dust seal back on. So this way it'll be quicker. Oops. I gotta get a socket wrench on this. So now what Sean's going to do for me while I'm out here with the torque wrench, Sean is standing on the brakes and I've got my torque wrench set to 174 foot-pounds, and this is a 35 millimeter socket. Let's see, pull up, but we'll see how I can do it. That was it. 174 foot-pounds. Now that seemed really easy. You know what I mean?
No, I mean, I don't know. I wasn't on it.
Yeah.
Is that set right? 174?
Yeah. Wish we had bigger cotter keys, but oh well. A little bit of a thicker one, huh? Okay. Got this doodad on there. What is that doodad called? Let's see. We're going to continue calling that the doodad, lock ring or whatever, and put a new cotter key in there. Now we're going to get this damaged dust cover back on there. Hopefully. If I can get it. Hanging up right there at that lip. We're struggling with this because his dust cap was a little bit messed up to begin with, so, and I tried to pound it back in shape, and I don't know if I
get it right there.
There we go. So just work your way around. So I don't know if you remember in YouTube land, it was a little bit bigger gap. I took a little ball peen hammer and hammered it out, but my metal working skills aren't that great, so it's better than it was. If you had a wheel spacer, put those on next. You know,
That's all good.
that's something I'm gonna have to get. It's brake cleaner. Oh, I don't have brake cleaner. I don't know. What kind of mechanic am I? Yeah, you're gonna have to hit the brakes.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead and hit the brakes. Oh man. You on them?
Yeah.
So I'm torquing all these to 85 foot-pounds. The same you torque the wheel lug nuts, this wheel spacer. I'm just cinching them up in a crossing pattern. Just tightening this spacer for his truck. He's standing on the brakes so the rotor doesn't turn. Okay, they're all torqued to 85 foot-pounds. We're just getting the lug nuts on now, and then we're not going to tighten them all the way. We're just going to cinch them down. We're just going to cinch them up and then torque them when we lower the truck back to the ground. So, like we said, we're going to see if we could do it the easier method with the impact gun. We got a 35 millimeter regular socket with a breaker bar, and then Sean's going to get in, step on the brakes to hold the rotor, and then I'm going to see if I can break this free. Okay, Sean's going to go in the truck, step on the brakes. I'm going to see if I can break this free with the breaker bar. All right, let's see if that works. I don't know if it's twisting on me. Yep, got it finally. You can do it. It worked. Harder than definitely harder than doing it the impact gun way, but we can do it. But the ball joint and the outer tie rod can be disconnected, right? Mm-hmm. We got the other side in. We didn't need to show you that because you already showed you the first side. That'd be redundant. You can see this copper washer that I have. I put a new one on, and I'm just tightening the drain plug, and then I'm going to fill it. The way we fill it is we buy, a jug of fluid, a 75W90, and then we use this pump, this little pump that you could buy like at an auto parts store, like O'Reilly's or AutoZone, and then we just pump it into the fill plug. We'll pump it into there. So, and we'll put a new washer after for that, a new crush washer. So this is what we were after with this extended boot mod, why we put the old piece somewhere in there and stretched the old boot over it. So now you can see that these rubber fins, or whatever you want to call them, are now separated to where they're not going to be rubbing up against each other and causing friction and a tear. Hopefully this fix is going to last a long time. We hope. So that's what we were after. This job took longer than we thought, like almost every job we do. So the thing that hung us up the most is I bought this cheap set of CV axle pliers. This one's actually broken. This is the second set. We went and got another one at O'Reilly's. This one actually snapped. One of the things broke in here. So you can see it's not even meeting up. Messing around with these clamping pliers was one of our major hang-ups, getting the OEM CV axles rebooted. So once we got over that, the job went a little bit faster. We had a little bit of a snag getting the first CV joint out, and then getting it back in was just a simple matter of pushing it back in, which kind of shocked me that I was able to push the one in just with my hands to get that C-clip past the flange. And then on the driver's side, it didn't go in easy at all. We had to use a pry bar and actually hit it on the end of the flange to knock it in. So, the passenger side went in with just hand strength, and the other one I had to hit with a hammer to knock it past the flange and get that C-clip to seat. So I guess it was successful. We finished it. It took a lot longer than we thought, but like I said, I'll put a link to a good set of CV axle boot pliers rather than this piece of junk. So there it is there. Thank you for watching Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean, and we're thankful that we're done with this. Hopefully it's going to last a long time. All right, bye-bye. Okay, we're back about 5 days later, and we're going to improve on this CV reboot and axle replacement. We didn't like the fact that we had to use zip ties on one of the ends on the modified end. There's a couple things that I bought to make this repair better. Number one, as I bought these Lyle crimping pliers. You could just tell by picking them up, they're way beefier. The metal's a lot thicker. You could actually use the 1/2-inch drive, either ratchet or a mini breaker bar, to get a better force to clamp them. It actually shows right here in the picture that you can use tools for increased clamping force. And this is the number, the Lyle number, 30800. And I'll put a link to the Amazon to where I bought these from. And then to replace the zip ties, Moog makes this kit. It's this number here, and it's a universal crimp boot clamp. It has a bunch of little ones where you can make small clamps, and then you have ones where you can make bigger clamps. And then it comes with a bunch of banding material underneath. There's a spool of it. And so this is what the kit comes with. 10 of the small ear, 10 large ear, and then 16 feet of the actually band steel. And so to make the small clamps, I'm just following these instructions. It says, you know, use metal cutters, cut approximately 2.5. I started with 3 inches, so in case the boot is a little bit bigger. And then it shows where you put it on one side and then bring it around, cut it to length, and then crimp it. So that's what we're going to do to replace those zip ties we put on earlier in the video. So we've got the truck back on 6-ton jack stands, resting on the frame. We've got one of the rear wheels chalked fore and aft, so it can't roll. And then, so we're going to try to, what we're going to do right now is we're going to try to crimp the boots a little bit tighter. So these ones right here, we're going to try to crimp these a little tighter than I got with that crummy tool. And then right here, we put the zip tie, because this is the modified side where it's not in its usual spot, and the original clamp wouldn't work to get that tight. So we have to make a custom diameter clamp, and that's why I bought that kit. So that's what we're going to do today to finish up this job. So we've got the new Lyle crimpers on there, and I'm just seeing if I could actually get it tighter than with the other crummy tools that I have. And I'm finding that it's about as tight as it's going to get. So what's interesting is that the original clamps that come off, the gap on the clamp is a little bit less, like it's only like about a 1 millimeter. So they must have some type of really special tool, and this is like, this end is kind of bubbled up more like rounded than flat. So they must use a different tool at the factory to crimp these. So I think they're plenty tight. So the other tool did actually get it pretty tight, but they deformed and they broke. So these Lyle ones are a lot beefier. So now that we've checked the tightness of these, we've got this zip tie one, and I'm going to make a custom size with that kit that the Moog kit, and we're going to get rid of this zip tie and put a metal band clamp and get it really tight. Okay, so we forgot to show you what a stocked truck looks like. So this is the inner boot against the differential, and you can see on my truck that the ribs of the rubber boot come nowhere close to touching. So you can see that there's gaps in between. And so that's what we were going for with the modification for the lifted trucks, is to get a separation of the ribs of the boot so they don't rub together, cause friction, and then end up tearing. Okay, I'm just going to cut off this carefully so I don't ruin the boot, I hope. There we go. Okay, so again, this is the modified side, and so I've got these clamps that I made, or going to make. So again, it shows you hook one end over, so I'm going to hook this one over and just use a needle nose pliers to kind of bend the tab down, kind of hold it. Let's see, is that going to work? Yeah, it's a little bit bent down. Let me get a bigger pliers, crimpers. I don't know if you're supposed to do this. They didn't say this in the step, but as long as it's hooked on there. So fit it over, and then you're going to have to cut it to size. So I got this on, I'm just hooking it over the end here, and then I'll bring it around and see where we're at. Okay, let's wrap it around. So that's too long, so we have to cut a little bit off. Okay, so looks like I'm close. To the right length. So you just wrap it around and it hooks on these tiny little hooks on the clamp. So we'll see how well that does, and then I'll try to crimp it and see if it gets it nice and tight. It's a little test of patience. You have to hook it around and then make it to where it's not going to fall off. So now I've got it hooked on both sides and it's pretty tight to start with. Now you grab your crimping pliers and you're grabbing each side of this rectangular thing and you're crimping it together. So, yeah, oh, fuck me. All I can say is the directions make it sound a lot easier, since the smaller of the clamps doesn't have like little bend over tabs like the big ones do. It wants to fall off on you. So anyways, you know, cut a little more than you think you need, bend it around, then figure out where you need to cut it to size, and then you kind of have to hold your fingers on the clamp so it doesn't break away, because it's just got these tiny little tabs holding it. And then get your pliers on there with another hand, or better yet, have a buddy hold it, and then you can crimp it together. So now I'm just crimping it. I think that's got it pretty good. Hopefully this is going to be better than the zip tie. I think it is. I'm going to crimp it a little bit more. So hopefully the next side is going to be easier, but no more zip ties. So you can see there, the crimp is not maxed out, so I didn't cut it too short. And so you can see a little gap there, hopefully. It's not too close. And it's tight with these pliers, so it's good to go. So to make this crystal clear is that when we popped it out, this is not necessarily the pry bar we used, but a pry bar like this, we got in between here and popped it free, so more like that, and pried it towards the outside, towards the wheel, and popped that C-clip loose, because that C-clip is somewhere, you know, in this neck of the woods, behind a flange. How I checked to make sure that it was locked is, see how I'm pulling this back and forth, and I could feel that C-clip grabbing. So that lets me know that it's fully seated, that it's not going to pop out. So once you think you got it seated, get underneath the truck, grab your hands around it, and pull out towards the wheel, and feel that the clip is living right behind that flange, not letting you pull it out. So this is what you're trying to pop free when you're getting it out, is that clip right there. So just make sure you grab this and make sure it's all the way in. And so just to be really clear with you watching this video, is that the extended boot mod is only for lifted trucks. So if you have like 2-inch, 3-inch lift to where now your inner CV boot ribs are hitting each other, that's the purpose of the extended boot mod, is to expand out the ribs so they're not rubbing up against each other. If you have a stock height truck, you don't have to worry about this. You just put the boot in the normal place that it would normally go into on the axle. It has those little ribbed areas where the boot kind of seats into, and just do it normally. So just be very clear that the extended boot mod is only for lifted trucks that are having problems with the inner boot tearing on them and not lasting as long as it should. So I just wanted to clarify that.